My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly creeps down the driveway, and douse himself in lukewarm water, all the while screaming epic win, epic fail, or fuck epic maintenance of the status quo. For all I know, it can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So, when he knocked on my door the other day, told me he was going away for a few weeks, and asked that I get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and what I could only assume was a birthday card. Then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. In big red letters was written "Return to Sender." I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Lugging it across the road to my house was even harder, and I quickly realized there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs and through my front door. I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of shit that refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have set the package down while I struggled to open the tricky door. But you know how it is when you've got a good grip on something. No point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package, and it fell to the ground. I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hoped I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it, and let him assume the break happened en route. Hands-free, I finally managed to get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up and over me. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbor would come back to claim it. And then I forgot all about it. Until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure exactly how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage to house door, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly sweet odor similar to a skunk, and for the first few days after I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's exactly what it was, roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realized the scent was growing more intense instead of fading that I went looking for a source. That's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odor knocked me back, holding my nose. The culprit wasn't hard to identify. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to have been so large and heavy? An entire freaking cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box, a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger, but I wasn't about to poke my finger into spoiled meat juices. That soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. If I tried to drag it out whole, everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat one garbage bag at a time, and take them down to the dumpster, a process I wasn't looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new gamut of stink. It was like opening a burning oven, but instead of a heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, shit, and putrefaction. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down the puke begging to guzzle out of me. I don't think I could have handled that scent mingling with the horrors coming out of the box. I'm not ashamed to admit I ran out the door for a breath of fresh air, but in the short time I'd spent in the garage, the smell had become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing I tried could keep the smell out of my nostrils. Not air fresheners, not a face mask, not 3 showers and a change of clothes. Every second that box lay open in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold into my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open as though inviting me to look. I was prepared, a clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. But, as it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of that box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor, dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops, and naturally they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect a man with a corpse in his garage, after all. Thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box, the smell might have left a mark throughout my house, but there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence of vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not sure if they were allowed to, or if they felt so bad for me they figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, I saw it. My neighbor was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He'd brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off for shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours or days, I'm honestly not sure, my neighbor recorded a few short clips about his progress. I think I'm in a truck now, I can feel it moving, must be in a warehouse. Pretty warm here, still got plenty of food, that kind of stuff. And then on the last entry the box toppled over, he broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door. For the last couple of years, I've been telling myself I'm in my early 70s, but math doesn't lie. Today is my 75th birthday, and wow, the years do fly. I'm not looking for birthday wishes or congratulations. This isn't a milestone I'm excited about. Sure, I'm glad to still be here, but with each passing year I find less and less to live for. My bones ache, my kids live far away, and the other side of my bed has been empty for just over 8 months now. Honestly, once I cast my vote against that guy Trump this November, I might have nothing to live for at all. So skip the happy birthdays and the congratulations. I'm here because I have a story for you, one I've never told before. I used to think I kept it inside because it was silly, or because no one would believe it. But the older you get, the harder it is to lie to yourself. If I'm being perfectly honest, I've never told anyone this story because it scares me to death. But death seems friendlier than it used to, so listen close. The year was 1950, and I was 9, living in a small town in Maine. I was a small kid, with only one friend who moved away that summer, making it the worst summer of my life. My dad wasn't around, and my mom was always nagging. Chore whore was my nickname for her. And boy, was I proud of that one. So I didn't want to hang around the house. I decided to spend my summer at the public library. It wasn't much, but it was better than home. No chores, no nagging mom, God rest her soul, and no other kids to bother me. I was the only one sad enough to spend his summer hiding among the bookshelves, and that was just fine with me. The first half of my summer was dreadful. I'd sleep until 10, do my chores, and then ride my rusty old bike to the library. Once there, I'd annoy the old folks without really trying. One nice lady even told me to shut the heck up. But she didn't say heck. I was amazed at grown-ups swearing. The dreary days turned into miserable weeks. I was actually praying for school to start again until I found the basement. I thought I knew every inch of that library, but one day, hidden behind the foreign language section, I discovered a small wooden door I had never seen before. That's when everything changed. The door was made of old oak, with a knob that looked ancient, maybe from the 17th century. Engraved on the knob was a single footprint. I felt like whatever was behind that door was forbidden, and therefore the most interesting thing I'd find all summer. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, turned the knob, slipped behind the door, and shut it. It was pitch dark. I took a few steps and stopped, scared by the complete darkness. I waved my hands around, trying to find something to hold on to, and found a small string dangling from above. I pulled it down and a light bulb flickered to life. I was standing on a dusty platform that looked like it hadn't been touched in ages. To my left was a rickety spiral staircase made of wood, ready to collapse any second. The light from the bulb was dim, so when I peered over the railing, the bottom of the staircase disappeared into darkness. I was scared. This place didn't belong in a town library. It felt like I was in a completely different building. But no 9-year-old can resist a mystery. Looking back, I wish I could tell my younger self to turn around, go back, do anything else but go down those stairs. You'll avoid many sleepless nights, I'd say. But I didn't know that then, and even if I did, I might not have listened. So I took a deep breath, gripped a railing, and started my descent. The wood was dry and splintery. I let go, balancing myself as I carefully went down. The staircase seemed endless, and with only the dim light from above, my heart pounded in the darkness. Even kids can sense when something isn't right, but they don't always care. When I finally reached the cement floor, the light from above was almost gone. But there was a new light source, a door in front of me, massive and deep red. Light seeped from behind it, forming a glowing rectangle. For the second time, I took a deep breath and went through a door I shouldn't have. The room beyond was blinding. When my eyes adjusted, what I saw took my breath away. It was a library, the most perfect library imaginable. I stepped in almost reverently. It was beautiful, smaller than the library above, but it seemed made just for me. The shelves were packed with brightly colored titles, the armchairs were incredibly comfortable, and the smell was unbelievable. A mix of citrus and pine. I can't do it justice with words, but I've never smelled anything better, not in my 75 years. What was this room? Why had I never heard of it before? Why was no one else here? Those were the questions I should have asked, but I was intoxicated. As I gazed around at the books and basked in the smell of paradise, I had only one thought: I will never be bored again. For 3 years, I visited my basement sanctuary as often as I could, usually several times a week. I never saw anyone else down there, and no one seemed to notice me. I never took a book out but picked up where I left off during my last visit. I always sat in the same deep purple armchair, leaving its twin empty across from me. That chair was mine, the other was not. On my 12th birthday, I arrived later than usual. My mom had invited a couple of classmates and some cousins over to celebrate, but I just wanted to spend my birthday in the library. When the guests left, I rushed to the library about 15 minutes before closing time. The workers never checked the basement before locking up, so I was free to stay as late as I wanted. That night, I was devouring the final chapters of an epic adventure. I didn't smell it until I finished the book. The once exquisite aroma had turned sour. I sat, unsettled. Objectively, the smell was the same citrus and pine, but now it seemed wrong, like an optical illusion that suddenly changes. The spell was broken. The odor seemed to come from somewhere specific. With trepidation, I sniffed around the room like a crazed dog until I found the source: a large, leather-bound book with a faded maroon cover and a black footprint on the spine. I opened the front cover and saw one sentence scrawled in blood-red ink. "Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie." I stared at the sentence, memorized, and began to walk back to my chair. I turned a page blank. The smell grew stronger. Another blank page, and the smell intensified. I suppressed a gag and kept walking. As I neared the armchairs, I turned one final page, and there, in the same sinister print, was my name. I dropped the book and sprinted for the door, but stopped dead in my tracks. The empty chair wasn't empty anymore. An aged man in a suit sat there, one leg crossed over the other, staring at me with piercing gray eyes and a light smirk. It was too much. I fell to my knees and threw up on the carpet. The man chuckled. "Who are you?" I asked, panic in my voice. The man stood, gently helped me to my chair, and sat back down in his. "We got off to a bad start," he said, glancing at the mess on the carpet. "The smell. It takes getting used to." "Who are you?" I repeated. "Tonight you'll know hardship like you've never known," he said. "I come as a friend, offering refuge from it, and from all other storms ahead." I wanted to leave, but I stayed seated. I asked what he was talking about. "Your mother is dead, my boy, by her own hand in the kitchen. The scene is gruesome," he said with sorrow, though there was a glint in his eye. "Surely you want to avoid this path. I can show you a safer one." My blood ran cold, but I didn't believe him. "What do you want with me?" I demanded, trying to sound brave. He laughed, an old raspy yelp that shook him. "Nothing but your friendship," he said. "I want you to join me on a journey. My work is noble, and you'll make a fine apprentice. And maybe, when I'm done," he sighed tiredly, "maybe then, my work can be yours." I stood, shuffling toward the door but never breaking his gaze. "You're crazy," I said. "My mom isn't dead. She's not." "See for yourself," he said, gesturing toward the door. I glared at him and bolted. As my hand closed around the knob, he said my name softly. Despite myself, I turned. "Your road won't be easy. If it ever becomes too much, and I mean ever," he said, sweeping his hand over the room, "you know where to find me." I slammed the door and took the stairs 2 at a time. I exited the library, jumped on my bike, and raced home. The front door was wide open. I left my bike in a heap and approached the house cautiously. The old man was lying. He had to be. Still, tears stung my eyes. Heart pounding, I stepped inside and called for my mother. No answer. I turned into the kitchen. To this day, I don't know why she did it. I've lived in that small town in Maine my entire life, avoiding the library. Once, in my late 20s, I summoned the courage to go back. Life was good then, and my fear had turned into curiosity. The door to the basement was gone, replaced by a blank wall. I asked the librarian about it, but she said there was never a basement. City zoning ordinances prohibited basements in the area. That sickly sweet smell, that blend of citrus and pine, has haunted me ever since my 12th birthday. When I saw my mother in the kitchen, collapsed in her own blood, I smelled it. When a man claiming to be my father knocked on my college apartment door, begged for money, and beat me when I refused. I smelled it. When my wife miscarried our second child, and our fourth, I smelled it. When our oldest son, drunk, crashed the family car and killed his girlfriend, I smelled it. I smelled it as my wife became sick and died last year. Now I smell it every day. It feels like an invitation. A few months ago, I went back to the library. The small oak door with the ancient handle was there, right where it used to be. Every day since I've walked past that library, but I haven't gone inside. Maybe tonight I will. I'm scared to die, yes, but lately I'm more scared to keep living. The old man was right, my road hasn't been easy, and it won't get any easier. Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie. He promised relief, a refuge. Was he right about that too? There's only one way to find out. After all, I still know where to find him. It was a dark and stormy night. 12-year-old Jack lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The wind howled outside, making the trees tap eerily against his window. He couldn't sleep, something felt off. Jack's parents were away for the night, and his big sister, Emily, was supposed to be babysitting him. But she was downstairs, lost in a movie marathon, leaving Jack alone in his room. The house felt too big, too empty, and the shadows seemed to creep closer with every passing minute. Suddenly he heard a strange noise coming from the attic. It was a soft thud, followed by a scraping sound. Jack sat up, heart pounding. What could it be? Emily, he called out, but there was no answer. The sound of the TV blaring downstairs drowned out his voice. Jack tiptoed out of his room and down the hallway, each creak of the floorboards making his stomach twist. He reached the attic door. It was slightly ajar, and a cold draft blew through the gap, sending shivers down his spine. With trembling hands, Jack pushed the door open. The stairs to the attic were dark and steep, disappearing into the blackness above. He hesitated, then grabbed the flashlight from the hall table. The beam cut through the darkness as he climbed the stairs. Halfway up, he heard the noise again. Thud, scrape. It was louder now, more distinct. Jack's heart raced as he reached the top. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and dusty memories. Shadows danced on the walls, making the space seem alive. He moved the flashlight around, illuminating old toys, broken chairs, and forgotten treasures. The noise seemed to come from deeper within the attic. Gathering his courage, Jack walked further in, the floorboards creaking under his weight. Then he saw a large, old trunk in the corner. The noise was coming from inside. Jack took a deep breath and stepped closer. Thud, scrape. The trunk shook as if something inside was trying to get out. Jack reached for the latch, his hand trembling. Just as he touched it, the attic door slammed shut behind him. He spun around, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly. "Who's there?" he shouted, but only the wind answered. Panic set in. He was alone in the attic with something that was very much alive inside that trunk. He took a step back, considering running down the stairs and hiding under his bed. But curiosity got the better of him. He had to know what was inside. With a swift motion, Jack unlatched the trunk and threw it open. Inside he found an old, dusty puppet. Its eyes seemed to gleam in the flashlight's beam, and it lay there still and lifeless. Jack sighed in relief and laughed at his own fear. But then, as he turned to leave, he heard it again. Thud. Scrape. He looked back, and the puppet was sitting up, staring right at him. Jack's scream echoed through the house as the attic light flickered and went out. Downstairs, Emily finally heard the noise and rushed up to find Jack huddled in the corner, the puppet lying innocently back in the trunk. She shook her head, smiling at her brother's wild imagination. "Come on, Jack, it's just a puppet," she said, helping him up, but Jack knew what he had seen, and from that night on, he never went near the attic again. Days passed, and Jack tried to forget about the puppet, But strange things started happening around the house. Objects would move on their own, doors would creak open, and at night he could hear soft whispers coming from the attic. One evening, Jack heard Emily scream. He rushed to her room and found her staring at her desk where the puppet now sat, its head tilted slightly, as if it were watching her. "Jack, how did this get here?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Jack replied, equally frightened. They both knew the puppet had been in the trunk. Determined to get rid of it, they decided to take the puppet back to the attic. Together, they climbed the stairs, the flashlight casting eerie shadows. When they reached the attic, they saw that the trunk was open, and inside it was a piece of parchment. Jack picked it up and read the faded writing, "Whoever disturbs my slumber shall be cursed." A chill ran down their spines. They threw the puppet back into the trunk and slammed it shut. But as they turned to leave, the attic door slammed shut again, locking them inside. Suddenly, the trunk began to shake violently. The lid burst open, and the puppet flew out, landing at their feet. Its eyes glowed a sinister red as it began to move on its own. "Run," Jack shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. They darted towards the door, but it wouldn't budge. The puppet was closing in on them, its wooden limbs creaking with each step. In a moment of desperation, Jack remembered the flashlight. He shone it directly at the puppet, and to his surprise, it stopped, covering its eyes with its tiny hands. "Keep the light on it," Emily shouted. Jack nodded and slowly backed towards the door, keeping the beam steady. Emily managed to unlock the door, and they both stumbled out, slamming it behind them. Panting and terrified, they vowed never to speak of that night again. But from then on, they always felt as if they were being watched, especially at night when the wind howled and the shadows danced. And in the attic, the old trunk remained locked, hiding the puppet and its dark secrets. But Jack and Emily knew one thing for sure: they would never disturb it again.